Thank you for dropping by at Equity Communities of Practice, the convening place for cross-sector collaboration, community advocacy, and personal development, where development and growth are key to achieving sustainable and effective change. Our mission is to leverage insights gained through ongoing community building to promote health equity across all sectors, including finance, education, healthcare, public health, environmental justice, corporate social responsibility, and more. For more information, visit our website at www.equitycommunitiesofpractice.com. Together, we can make a difference. And now your host, Executive Director, Dr. Harry Pettaway, aka Dr. Harry the Equity Coach.
My guest is laughing. My scenes have just gone wild, and this is okay. This is how it works live. Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Dr. Harry, the Equity Coach. If you are tired of the same old in your news feed, if you're tired of doom scrolling, if you are tired of being stuck in silos, and you want to learn how to get shit done, come on over to Equity Communities of Practice, where we will help you break your personal algorithm. Today, I am so excited. Today, we have a special edition, a very special guest, someone, Bronco alum, by the way. So we have Megan Jantos, and let me tell you a little bit about Megan. Super cool. Megan is the strategic communicator at the U.S. Army. 20 years project management and leading teams. That's a long time. Professor of persuasion. Is there a cooler title than that? And my favorite, she is absolutely a certified badass. So I hope you all enjoy me. This should very much be very fun. Let us welcome Megan Jantos. Megan, how you doing?
Hey, Dr. Harry, I'm doing great. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
I know you're laughing. We went through the whole thing and all the slides, and I still started pushing too many buttons, but it is so happy to have you here. Everybody, take a look QR code. If you are watching this on replay, take a snap of the QR code that will take you to Megan's LinkedIn profile. She's got a lot of profiles out there. But happy to have you, Megan.
It's so good to be here. Thanks.
So, Megan, I like to start off the show with asking people how they're arriving, right? And so it's I'm arriving I'm a little excited. I divorced my political Facebook page last night. Feeling a little bit relieved. It kind of goes along with what we're talking about today, but I had to let that go, and so I'm coming here a bit refreshed, like that drum, a little bit refreshed, energized, ready to go. How are you arriving today?
Harry, I'm just cold, to be honest. I don't know why it's colder here in Kansas than it is in Alaska, but I just came out of my kitchen where my dog's water was frozen. And so I'm just trying to stay warm, but also very excited to be here talking about my favorite topic of influence.
I almost played the Bronco fight song for you for coming in, but maybe we'll do this again, and we can have people sing along with us. Fight on for Broncos. Hey, let us know in the chat, how are you all arriving? Let us know where you're coming from, what you're interested in hearing about. I always say this because I got a lot of tech here. If you're just here for the tech, please drop it in the comments. Let us know where you're coming from, how you're feeling, what mood you're in, whatever you want to say, at least say hello. It just makes this whole thing a lot funner. And today, awesome topic. We're going to be talking about influence. And I met Megan at it was homecoming, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. It was homecoming. One of my one of the football players that played a little bit before me, they were renaming the field. We had this super awesome conversation about people and communication and all that. And Megan was like, I am a professor of persuasion. I'm like, oh my God, I need you to come on and talk with us. And so what are you going to learn today? Right? What are we going to get into? And there's a few things. So like I said, we're going to be talking about persuasion. We're going to be talking about influence, and influence is not a naughty word. We'll get into that in just a bit. We'll also be saying fact or fake. This is a fakish news broadcast. So how can you tell the difference? And then how to shape your environment, how to shield yourself. I know, a lot of people saying like, it's troubled times out there. And I don't agree, because for a lot of people, they think it's awesome times. So it depends on what your lens is, what your perspective is. But, obviously there's something out there, and hopefully we can share some information with you to keep you on track and keep you from not going too crazy in this time of need. And so I'm going to slow down a little bit. Megan, tell me, why is influence not a naughty word?
Well, so influence, coming at it from the perspective of, behavior change. That's what it means to me, is, getting an effect that you wanted. Leadership is all about behavior change. And so I think a lot of times nowadays you hear in negative context, and in reality, to me, it's like a tool, a hammer, or even, a knife from the kitchen, where it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. And so just understanding that as we talk about this, that we're not trying to condemn anybody for their actions when they're trying to change people's behavior, that there can be situations where it's neutral or used for good.
Yeah, we so in the health equity space, and in the public health space, we rely a lot on influence, and there's a lot of behavior models out there. One of them's the health belief model, and it's basically how people decide to do something, and you can apply that to, like, I'm going to quit smoking. You can apply that to whom I might vote for. You might apply that to, am I just going to drink more water? It's one of those things that's an is. It just is. And I think we take it for granted because we can put our own definitions to it. And again, depending on what kind of lens you're looking at it through, the perception is influence is good or bad. If you are joining us, if you take a look at I'm getting good at this. If you take a look at the ticker at the bottom, we've got some examples of influence, from advertising to whatnot. Like that one? Whatnot. It's so technical. That's what happens in a live broadcast. What are some of the things that you think the world is focusing on right now in terms of influence?
Well, actually, noteworthy is that next week is the 3rd anniversary, I believe, of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so if you do any studying of Russia, they obviously have a lot of influence baked into their approach of warfare. And so that's something that's obviously going on. And then with that, we just came out of an election and a peaceful transfer of power. So there's just so much going on in the world that is changing, and it's interesting to watch.
I think how we got into this conversation too, I had made a post about, and we'll get into misinformation in a little bit, but I had been overwhelmed with how the world was responding to each other. What we were talking about, how we were talking past each other, those type of things. And so I made a post, and I'll put a link in the comments at some point talking about that. You know how people used to say, like, it's unprecedented times back in COVID?
Yeah.
It's unprecedented times, I think, in terms of influence, even like when the Super Bowl just happened. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch the Super Bowl show, but one of the Did you have a chance to watch the halftime show, or did you watch the game because of where you live? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Look, now I'm feeling bad about even bringing it.
Yeah, that's a tough topic, Gary. A big ouch.
Sorry. Sorry. Look, that's me putting on my, I shouldn't say blinders. I wasn't even thinking about that. I know you're a Chiefs fan. Did you see the halftime performance?
I did, but I have to say that I pretty much went to sleep after that because I didn't recognize the team that was playing, and they just didn't show up. And then I started watching the halftime show, and I was just sort of disheartened. But I was looking for a little more entertainment, but I appreciate the symbolism.
Yeah, no problem. One of the things that was interesting is that Kendrick Lamar had talked, and this isn't like a pro Kendrick Lamar or anything, but at the end of his performance, he talked about his influence, and so it was interesting. And I don't know that a lot of people talk it. There's been so many breakdowns of his halftime performance, but as he got into it, he said, he talked about his influence. And that crowd obviously wasn't his crowd. Like, it wasn't a lot of people that knew his music. I mean, that's just kind of known. But there's a point in when he plays a certain song. That one. When he plays it, and there's a point in the song where the entire crowd said A minor, like they all knew the words. And it's kind of interesting to see globally, the type of influence that he might have. It's not, he's not a president or anything like that. Kind of goes to show, I keep saying goes to show the influence of social media. I'm going to keep saying influence over and over and over again. And I rely on you to stop me from repeating myself on that. But let's move into some of the challenges with influence, specifically fact or fake. And how do you tell the difference? And maybe I might be the only person that's concerned about this. And also, if you're joining us, I know that we do have some folks here. Let me check the chat really quick. Just hold on a second. Hey, this one is awesome for you. I don't know if you saw it. So I talked about how great you were.
Oh.
And Billy thinks the same thing.
Billy, how are you? Thanks for coming out.
Billy, thanks for joining. We appreciate here. Hey, Billy, if we say anything that you want to chime in on, please do. It makes the whole thing. Are you influenced by anything at all, Billy? We would love to know. Put it in the chat. It'd be great. But fact or fake?
Well, real quick, I want to touch on what you just said.
How do you know the difference?
I want to touch on what you just said before we go into how do you know the difference. I think an important thing that we have to admit first before we can start breaking down what's fact or fiction is that we're all susceptible to influence. There are different people in our lives that change our behavior based on what they say or what they do. And so I think that right now there's a lot of people who pick sides. And I think that that's how you and I kind of linked up is that we both have an appreciation for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we're also not so naive to believe that everything we read, on a certain topic is true. And so we have to go out and we have to seek out truth. And so if a person doesn't admit to themselves that they're susceptible, then they'll forever be stuck being controlled by other people and their narratives.
Yeah, I think going back to that conversation too, like a big part of it had to do with diversity of thought. I know sometimes in the diversity circles, depending on what circle, they don't really like talking a whole lot about diversity of thought, even though that's really what it's all about. I learned about diversity studying the space shuttle, right? And so like when I was working on my public administration program, the first space shuttle that blew up because they had an O-ring failure because they didn't have enough people in the room. Like, so they were having like biased decisions. And it's kind of similar. It seems really simple, silly, engineers and scientists. It's like, I think this O-ring might be a problem. That's not true. It's just so easy to kind of dismiss stuff, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And actually, it's funny that you bring that up, because that's how I really got into the DE&I conversations. I never felt like I had to do it because I was a woman. I just felt like, being in the military, sometimes, uniformity, we value that. And that's a good thing based on what our mission is. However, when you start talking about topics like communication and communicating with different audiences, you have to have the ability to bring in different voices so that you can understand what your audience's position is, and effectively communicate with them. And so if a person closes themselves off to an opposing point of view or just a different point of view, then it makes them less effective in communication.
I think for me, what I've found is that with that idea of believing that you're susceptible to it is also having the willingness to want to know if this is factual, fake, real, or whatever, or the willingness to even hear an opposing point of view or question yourself. It's especially hard for me. So like from a research perspective, it's kind of baked in. Like I can't write a research paper without listing out what my bias is, right? Like I have to say, like, here's all the things that could have been that could have influenced my research, and this is what's going to influence. I have to make sure that I had a buzzer go off in my ear. That's what's going to influence, the quality of my work. I've struggled. I think I told you I separated. Yeah, I did tell you I separated from my political group recently, and sometimes it's hard because you spend so much time studying and learning and critical thinking, which we'll get into in just a minute, but someone will come back with a meme, right? And that's the challenge with, I think, today's style of communication. A lot of this is old school Twitter based, 48 characters or less, which then led to meme based, here's a picture or not. And then if it's online, it's real. If the picture looks cool, it's real. And so a lot of people just take some of that stuff for granted. Megan, what are some of the things that you think we can do to decide if something's fact or fake?
Well, I think it goes into something you were sort of just touching on, right? It's this level of curiosity. And that's, earlier when you asked how I showed up, I should have told you, because I'm so cold I couldn't think. But really, I'm trying to stay in the frame of mind of being curious nowadays, because there's so much negativity that we could latch onto. Your political social media group that you were talking about, we end up in these silos, and there's so much negativity, and so we start to say, like, how can I get out of that? Well, my answer is curiosity, and that applies also not just with the audience that you're trying to engage with, but curiosity with the content that you're seeing. So it's as simple as saying, like, who wrote this? So, because you see a meme, like you said, all right, or an article or another piece of content, well, click on their profile. Do they even seem like a real person, or is this a bot, right? And even if it seems like a reputable source, because nowadays it's not that difficult to make something seem reputable, but anybody can make a website, and anybody can make it look professional, and they can link to other things that are professional. So you have to be willing to be curious about it and go a little bit deeper. So if you show up at a website and it's really difficult to figure out who they are, what they're about, where they're actually at, what companies might own them, you can start to, question whether or not maybe this is valid. And then you can say, who would benefit for me feeling some kind of way. Usually it starts with like witnessing a post on social media or a headline somewhere, and you feel some kind of way about it, and then you want to act right away. So you hit share with some angry message. And I think it's just about slowing down and saying, "Ooh, that's interesting. I wonder why I felt like that." And then just continuing to dig a little bit deeper.
I think it's interesting too to say, like, what was the intent of this message, right? Like, now that we're starting to talk about influence, even though I keep saying influence, I keep saying it over and over, but it's a great question. Like, what are they trying to influence? In terms of what this message is for, and who's it for, who's it benefit? I mean, that's a great point that you made. I want to show this picture. Hopefully I can get back to where we are, which is why this is dangerous, because you brought up bots, right? And so for the past, I think it's 4 years now, I've been an administrator in a LinkedIn forum, and it has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I would see the profiles start to come in, because it was like right after the election. A lot of them were kind of like foreign based, and I would look and I'd be like, this image looks like a stock photo. And so I would reverse search the image, and I would find that it's like, it's like a furniture company or something like that. And so that was one of the things. And then I would look and see how many contacts they have or connections, which isn't fair because everybody joins, new platforms every day. But, you see someone from, they've got 12 connections, and then you click on their connections and they're all from the same place. They're all from the same kind of company and stuff like that. They all have same stock photos. But over time, those bots got better and better because they've been, or at least some of the fake pages, I should say. So there's bots, and then there's fake profiles. And some of those profiles, and when I say fake, I don't mean to kind of come at me and my values. I'm saying I've seen them on both polar sides of the spectrums, and they have gained more and more followers because they're fairly controversial. And so I was frustrated last night because my goal, so coming from the public health space, a lot of our public health infrastructure is kind of we're getting hit kind of hard. Like, what we do to try to keep people healthy is it's becoming more and more challenging, and trying to keep an open mind and understanding that, change needs to happen. We need to be effective and efficient with our budgets and things like that. Like, I get it. But there's some things that are just impacting people's lives. And so I was on like the American Public Health Association's a post that they made. Now that's our I'm going to call it like our governing professional association, and it's typically full of people that have masters in public health, work in public health, some kind of research background or whatever. And then in the middle of it, there will be this like oddball clickbaity type of post. I'm like, who is that? And then I'll click on it, and it's like a hairstylist with 12 connections from somewhere else. And it's just like, I don't know if this is real or not. And then you go down these rabbit holes, and I'm not trying to complain about my social media trauma. But I ended up talking to ChatGPT, where I go to for therapy sometimes, for AI therapy, and tried to express myself artistically. And I came up with this idea, and I asked ChatGPT, I'm like, I need you to make a little cute AI-based bot that's looking in a mirror and comes out like a big troll. And this is what I got. So I don't know if it's relevant to the conversation, or maybe I just wanted to show it, but that's where we are.
No, I mean, I think it is relevant because part of understanding what's real or not is knowing that there are bots out there. There are nefarious actors who are purposely using these kind of technologies against us. And so I don't mean to sound hyperbolic or to instill fear, but it's something that is out there and people have to be aware of. And there are actors who benefit from sowing division amongst Americans. And if we think that's not happening, then that is naive.
I think that was one of the funnest things, like when we were having our conversations, is that I've got a perspective, from my lived experience, right? So, how I experience life, how I deal with it strictly in like this health equity, sometimes just Michigan, sometimes regionally, pretty much it's simply US um perspective, but you've seen this or you've studied this from a global perspective, and how that works. And I think that we're becoming so used to believing whatever shows up on our phone, um, because it's addictive, right? And that's the other thing about it. It's addictive. There's little alerts that go off that make us go, "Ooh, there's something." We get a like. Ooh, there's dopamine triggers that go off. I also think there's something about the arguments right now, which are frustrating. That it's almost like some people just want to fight. They want an opportunity to be big, like jump in the fight, like this little. This is another picture, the little fuzzy cute little troll that in the mirror they come across as a big giant. I cut you off, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just gonna say that I can see how people want to get involved in the conversation, because it can feel kind of what's the word I'm looking for? People could feel helpless in these sorts of situations where they're being impacted by information and asking themselves, what do I do with all this energy, right? And so they feel like they have to go out and educate everybody else, or counter what they think is misinformation or disinformation. When in reality, what I would really want people to do is empower them to find the truth and engage with other people by listening, getting curious about why someone else thinks so differently. Like, we literally witnessed the same event and we both walked away with a completely different message. That's fascinating. Like, let's have a discussion about that instead of saying you're wrong and I'm right. But it can also be sort of understandable that people feel like they need to act. And that's what influence is about, right? Like, somebody out there is trying to spur someone else into an action. And so we have to ask ourselves, who are we allowing to have power over us? And they have power over us through their stories that they tell that get us all worked up. And so we have to start with that self-awareness.
I also think there's a bit of discovery in there. Like like I can hear like one of the things that you just said, you talked about being curious and really wanting to know why somebody thinks that. That I'm finding that's difficult for a lot of people. It's a trait and I think that's part of why I was drawn to our conversation. It's something that you had to practice. You don't get it right. Like even me, we're having this conversation, and of course my ego is going to say I'm an expert of shielding myself from all these things. But part of the reason why I left that group is that I caught myself getting into these cycles of, I don't care what you think now, like because I came into it with that kind of curiosity, and by doing that, you do have to be vulnerable. You have to, especially if you're trying to have a real conversation, you have to kind of let your guard down. You have to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to listen. And I think people get confused with the idea of empathy versus agreement. I can be empathetic and have an understanding of your point of view and completely, absolutely disagree with you. And that can be okay with me. But I'm finding that a lot of people struggle with that. And I didn't get there just like it wasn't like, you flip the switch and that's how I was. I literally had to practice because I've been wrong a ton of times. I mean, I had to, you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, active listening isn't easy. It takes a lot of energy. And so I think it's one of those things where, to your point about leaving your social media group, there has to be time where you go and you allow yourself a break from being bombarded by the everyday influence around you, whether that's, turning your social media off, or just, taking yourself away from that holiday dinner where everyone's arguing about politics, but saying, I have some boundaries around that is important so that you can protect your own mental health. So then as you go into a conversation with somebody, you're not instantly triggered. So if you're not feeling safe enough to have that conversation, it's probably not the time to try to, practice the active listening.
Yeah, there's so much. It's so intertwined. You're talking about our mental well-being. We're recognizing triggers, and that's. I'll put the ticker back up. That's actually one of the things. There's the ticker that we'll put up is how to identify whether something is fake. But one of the things that it talks about is, does it evoke a ton of emotion? Now it's a fine line to say that, because there's a lot of real things that happen. I mean, we've got a couple wars going on. We have a lot going on that real facts in general might, they're going to cause a lot of emotion. But people's responses to it can help identify that. Talking about this group again, the thing that frustrated me is that I was looking for alternative points of view and a path towards something, but that's where my problem was, because I'm creating my own community, right? Like, I'm creating my own interdisciplinary community where people can come together and work together. And I'm also so used to being on LinkedIn, and I've shielded myself on Facebook. Like, I have a private network. I never really venture out. I'm really protective of that. And I creeped into the space where the norms were completely different. The goals were completely different. So even though the structure of it seemed like it should be similar, to have meaningful conversations and things like that, it just wasn't. It just wasn't.
Well, and it can be hard on social media, to have a meaningful conversation. I think it can happen, but I don't always recommend it, especially if you're feeling really charged about a topic. Yeah. And the other thing, you bring up this chart right here, something I wanted to make sure I addressed, because I didn't want to make it sound so much like everybody's out to get you, and these foreign entities are just trying to get inside your mind. I mean, there is that. However, sometimes it's just that innocent person that's in your network who might be sharing something that they think is true, but it happens not to be. And so they don't have a malintent to deceive you, but it's still subjecting people to this false information. And research shows that the more you're subjected to a narrative, even if you know it to be false, you actually start to believe it to be true. And so there is harm in it. And there are people who believe that this spreads like a virus, this being, misinformation or disinformation. And we have to kind of like inoculate ourselves against it, I think. And to your point, I would consider us both very educated people, but I'm still susceptible, and no matter what. And you can't just be, I think of it like the flu. You can't be just inoculated once and you're good forever. Like I get the flu shot every single year, right? Because each season is new and new things pop up. And I think the information environment is similar to that. And we cannot let our guard down in terms of just being mindful of the information that we're taking in and questioning, hey, is this source that I'm getting my information from still a valid source?
You made me giggle because I was getting ready to say, there you go, talking about vaccines being controversial. I had to make at least one joke. You said something. I'm trying to. Let's move. I'm going to move to this. I have a question for you. Do you remember the first fake thing you've seen online, that you saw online? And it's different. It's different because I realized, like, your role, you look at that and you talk about it and you research. Do you remember the first fake thing that you experienced online? I can share mine if you need to think about it.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a tough question though. Like the first thing ever. I mean, I'm pretty old. I was around when the internet, like still had the dial up,
Hey,
and
if you don't know, if I tell people, if you don't know, if you haven't done a 28.8 modem, you do not understand my pain. Hey, hey, let's take a break. Billy, we got something in the comments. Let's see. Billy put, complacency with your contacts can lead to misleading information, influencing your group's discussion and ideas. That is so. And Billy, if I interpret this the wrong way, let me know. But I think that's a huge part of it. Like, why would Megan send me something that's not completely accurate? Or I send Megan something that I made up on Canva that's satire, right? And oh my gosh, here, and you spread it on. But I think that that's a big part of it, that you believe your family, believe your network. Why would that not be accurate? And I think that's why it spreads so fast.
well, and I also think so. Speaking about networks and complacency, I mean, again, another thing I was guilty of recently was I got a friend request from somebody who I've known through Twitter in the military for many years, and I did a quick click on the new invite, and they looked legit, and I even DM'd that person like, "Hey, what's up with the new account?" And they responded immediately that they got hacked or something. And so I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then I don't remember how I found out, but then somebody's like messaged me. Oh yeah, a mutual friend messaged me and said, "Oh, hey, you're following that account, but that guy's fake. That's not him." And I was like, oh my gosh, how even I can fall for things like that, because I kind of just got complacent with. I did a quick search, clicking through, and I thought, okay, cool, fine. But now the problem with that as well is that when other people get the invitation in my network from that person, they're like, they trust me,
Right.
and they see my name and they see this other prominent person's name, and they're like, oh well, that person must be real. And it turns out to be a bot that was trying to replicate someone else. So yes, complacency, it happens to everyone, and we have to guard against it.
I'm gonna save this and make it a thing. It's gonna be a meme, Billy. I'll give you credit for it. I'm gonna make a post about that. I really like it. Let's talk a little bit about shaping your environment. And I have to tell you, the buttons for the sound effects and the music finally died. So there's no more music.
That's
I'm a little
okay.
down. I'm a little down about that. You sent a great quote. Would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it in dramatic fashion?
If you want to read it, you can. I was going to kind of just summarize if you make me do it, because no one wants
Go
to hear
ahead. You can summarize it.
Well, so I pulled this quote actually from an exercise I did recently, and it reminded me of the conversation that we were having, because we have to understand the enemy and ourselves if we want to be victorious. We can't just, nosedive into a battle and think, hubristically, and that we're just going to win based off of our sheer willpower, even though we might be strong and capable. But we have to have that ability to understand them and then also understand ourselves. And that goes back to some of the things that we were just talking about, right?
I think that's one of the challenges right now with the win or lose mentality. It's actually one of my frustrations about the world today. Why I say things like, "Come join the 85% of people in the middle." We actually do have a lot in common. But the idea that if you can't understand where another person's coming from, their perspective, or again, you don't have to agree with it. How are you ever going? There's a couple things. You can have nefarious objectives with it. If you don't understand them, how are you going to combat it, right? And I think actually that was the art of war. I'm trying
Yeah.
to. I try to. I told you before that I'm trying not to use military terms. And I realize that when I'm saying, I'm like, well, I guess that is a war.
That's okay. If
But
it's applicable, then, go for it.
yeah, but it's like if you don't understand the other person, you're never really gonna get anywhere. Like you're not gonna really, or you're gonna somehow have to figure out how to totally dominate them, which really doesn't help because then it's probably gonna be a cycle and they'll come back and totally dominate you. And for again, like for me in my health equity space, we always have to try to understand what motivates other people. Like, why don't you want to take the vaccine? Like what is it about it? And I don't mean that. I'm not trying to be provocative, but why don't you want to take any medication that it is? Why don't you want to drink water? Why don't you want to, it's that type of stuff. And by learning what the other person's all about, you're able to work together and find solutions and find some middle ground.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, going back to influences that we're trying to change someone's behavior, if you don't understand why they're or what is preventing them from, executing such behavior, then you're never going to move that person from one place to another.
Do you fact check people that agree with you? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
yes. I fact check myself, and I agree with myself
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, I actually go looking for other opinions sometimes. Like there'll be times where I'll ask, and it depends on who it is. I'll ask a certain group of people. I need you to tell me what I'm not considering. Like what don't I see? Where's my bias at? Usually I'm pretty good at checking my own bias just from a research perspective. But I tell you, like I as a human, I can get caught up in it because now if we're gonna fight, I'm gonna try to win, and then we're not in a good space. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and so one of the ways that I sort of, I guess, check myself is I actually have a very, very diverse network of people with really different opinions. And I know that can be a very delicate balance sometimes because you'll have one person on one side saying like, well, how can you be friends with that person? They're crazy, right? I think we always have to be careful when we start to hear people label others with names. That's a first sign. But one of the reasons why I keep my network so diverse is because I want to understand where other people are. Because if we stay inside of our silo, that's where the division comes from. And then we're no longer, the United States of America. We're divided.
You talked about name calling, and I know this isn't about. I mean, we should do another one of these about communication strategies and effective listening. Those are some of the again in my space dealing with executive orders. How do they impact people? So whether I agree with the executive order or not, or any kind of policy change that comes up, I literally have to look at it and see how's this going to affect the work that I do, and how do I navigate it. And it takes work to do that in a calm space. And what I see online, and actually what I see that triggers me, especially even with people that might agree with me, it's, for example, this blah 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 guy and you idiots and you lemons and blah blah blah. Now you know the truth. And it's almost like I look at him like, who are you talking to? like who do you think is gonna hear that and be open then like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so dumb and stupid. You win. And then it just, that's what the conversation becomes, is like, who was the best jabber, like who got the best jab in. And again, this is where I'm saying, like, as a human, like the old high school junior high guy in me, you know what I mean? Like before I realized like this is just not a good path to go down, can get caught up into that. I think I get more caught up into that in spaces where I don't expect it. Like if it comes at me. So if one, I don't like it when other people do it. I absolutely don't like it. I think it's a waste of time. I think you just did that for likes, trolls, and whatever, right? Like your social media status goes up. You earn more points in the room. But when it comes like from somebody either like closer in my circle or that in theory you would think that I would agree with, and then it's like, you're stupid. What did you say? And then it did, like, I just catch my energy level just goes off the hook.
Yeah. So to your point, like people within your circle, going back to like the family dinner or example, is that like how do you stay sane in a situation where you feel like folks are just regurgitating mis or disinformation, right? And I think this comes back to the curiosity that we were talking about and saying like, where did you hear that? That's interesting. And then, if they actually remember where they heard that from, then, asking more questions about it to get a better sense. And if you get a sense that it's not coming from a reputable source, you can provide an alternate source to your family member, and not like in a way where it's like, here's the right answer, and I am on this righteous path to truth finding. But then even having a conversation about, well, here's something I found. What do you think about this? How does this land with you? Um, and so it's a very delicate balance of curiosity and information sharing without coming off as a know-it-all.
Yeah, it's always one of the things that I try to practice is like, what's my role in this? Like what am I responsible for? And still believe this. Now, sometimes this runs a little thin for me, is like giving people an opportunity to recover. Like if you get into a conversation, and this is just in general, I think in life with your spouse or your kids or whoever, like if something happens, you have to have, let's say we get into a heated discussion, or it starts down to be a heated discussion. The faster you can give that person an opportunity to change course, and you change course as well, I think the better off that you'll be. Otherwise, I'm not going to lose the fight. We're both going to keep fighting, it just, I, it's so much
Yeah.
about communication skills that I just don't think that, not to be overly philosophical, but like, if we're going to change the education system, I think, my priority would be critical thinking, communication skills, and things like that, like things that would help us talk to each other, which I will give a selfish plug. That's actually part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, communication strategies of how to work with others and deal with diversity of thought. I just don't. Sometimes I wonder if people have the time to do it, or the willingness to invest the time for that type of interaction, because it's much easier to go to a soundbite.
Yes, no, and what I've witnessed is that people think communication is about talking, and in fact, I'm guilty. That's where I started off my career, as was interpersonal communications was my undergrad, and I thought I'm going to be the best communicator because I know how to talk. And
Right.
and then yeah, what was it? It was a group dynamics course or something. I ended up getting a C in, and it was funny because you got a group project, and you didn't even get graded on if you guys completed the project. You literally got videotaped like twice in your group meetings, and there were some other tasks, but essentially the teacher would just grade you on how well you contributed to the group moving this project in a direction. It really didn't matter what direction. And so what I found is I got a C because I was thinking, oh, well, the more I talk, I'm really contributing here. I'm doing such a great job. And I'm like, just patting myself on the back. And so when I got that C, I was devastated. I'm like, how could this happen? And, I had to go get schooled by my teacher.
Because you're a great communicator, because you know all the right words.
Right. Well, just words,
I think a trap that I run into, and a lot of people run into, again, this is another diversity, equity, and inclusion thing. It's this idea of knowledge bias, right? And so what I mean by that is that I know something, I've done all the research. Wait, I don't mean all the research. I've done a lot of research. I know my sources. It may even be my stuff, right? So I think I know everything. Or let's say that I do know a lot about a certain topic. The assumption then that everybody else knows it too. and so that everybody else is working on the same knowledge base that I have. So then they're obviously wrong. And if I can catch myself in that, it flips back on me too, right? Like I may not know everything. Like I have no idea what. Actually, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way that doesn't cause challenges. You and I had an interesting conversation about the fact that I might be a father soon, and I'm going to leave it at that level. And I was a bit challenged about. I told you, I said I'm a little challenged thinking that I'm going to raise a daughter and the world is it's worse than when I grew up. Like, things are worse than when I grew up. And what I loved about it, you were like, I'm gonna push back on that, Harry. And you rightfully said it. But what was interesting is you had a different perspective of what I was talking about, because you were talking about opportunity, prosperity, even like how far I gotta watch how I say this. Opportunities for women are better than they were. They're not great. And I was looking at it from a racial point of view, where I always thought it was always going to get better. And it seems like from a race perspective, some of the things like civil rights protections, like in employment, like this person did this to me. Well, that's against the law. Those things are in jeopardy, but we were just on different planes. You know what I mean? Like we're both pretty. Now I'm going to pat us both on the back. We're both pretty knowledgeable, right? We're both pretty smart, but we were just a slightly different. I shouldn't do that because it probably covers my mind. Slightly different lane.
Yeah, I
than
jumped
each
in
other.
with my own bias, right? Like, I have privileges being a service member, being a white woman. Like, I might be a minority in some situations, but I also have privilege in others. And so when we were having that conversation, I was so, quick to come at it with my point of view of like, no, it is safer. And also because usually when I'm having that conversation, it's about mis and disinformation and, people who
Right.
watch too much news news. And they're like, oh, it's such a dangerous world out there. When in reality, a lot of times what it is that they're just seeing a lot more of what happens in the world. But when you look at death rates and other statistics, we have a lot more ways to protect ourselves and even be prosperous, right? But you come at it from a different perspective, and I think there are valid points to that as well.
I'm glad that you were talking about it, like how you're used to seeing it. I think that's actually one of the risks. And again, not trying to get too weird with personal relationships, is that for me, there's a role that I'm playing in public in terms of information and trying to persuade people to look at a different point of view. And I'm used to looking at the talking points. I have to catch myself in being careful to not assume I know what they're talking about. And then even sometimes I give those people more credit because I have to intentionally show that I am trying to hear what you're saying, so that I can make sure I understand what you're talking about, so that we do have a productive conversation. But when you know people, you take shortcuts a little bit. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'll go and I'll talk to my wife. Will be like, "What is wrong with you?" I'll be like, I'm sorry. You were on that page again, weren't you?" I'm like, I was. I was, but it's again, that's how do we shield ourselves? What are some of the challenges with dealing with misinformation? I think at a personal level, it could really hamper your personal relationships.
Absolutely.
Just
And
overreacting.
yeah, well, because once we've known somebody for quite some time, we think we know everything about them, which is how they're going to act next and what they're going to say. And a lot of times we're not wrong, because we do have that experience. But then that's when it becomes so important to slow down. And first of all, I don't know if you said this earlier, if you were kind of hinting at it, is like letting people change or have an opportunity
Right.
to change their minds. I think that can be a barrier where somebody has already, sort of subscribed to a certain topic or an idea, or that they are for a certain person, and to change your mind because people will call you a hypocrite or that you waffle. But you know what if you just have new information about the situation? And so that's the next step to, okay, I'm curious and I have new information. Now I have to be open to changing my mind. And also we have to allow and give space to the people around us to let them change their mind, and that we don't pigeonhole them into a certain perspective or caricature.
Yeah, for sure. And also the idea that some people might now know differently and just not care. And what do you do with that? Well, you know better. Like, well, I still don't care. This is my position on life. We're coming close to the end of time. Are there any nuggets that you would like to share with the world? Anything you want to touch on?
Oh, yes, I do. So sometimes, like I was saying earlier, it can feel so helpless. Like we're just being bombarded with other people's agendas, and, our emotions go from one end of hope to like despair on the other, and fear. And I just want to remind people that you're in the control seat. Like, you can leave that political Facebook group. You can adjust your feed on social media. Now, doing that, you have to be cognizant that you are creating a specific, stream of data, and that then be intentional about getting out of that. So I have my silos where I go and I know what kind of information I'm going to get. But then I'm aware of that, and I say, okay, but here's another time where I'm going to purposely go out and subject myself to diversity of thought so that I can have a more holistic picture of the world. And so, like, we can control that. Other people don't have to control our behavior. If we think about it in advance. So that's what I mean by like control your environment. Shape your environment before it shapes you. So I think we talked about the example where there was a time in my life where I would walk in the door and there would be shoes on the floor, like piles of things. And I would get so annoyed, like, why can't my family just pick up their stuff? And it would happen, and I would be in this like angry mood, and then it would sort of, trail into the rest of the evening and ruin the whole mood. When I started thinking about shaping my environment, I said, why don't I just get like a coat hanger and a shoe rack? And now when people come in, they can put their stuff in an organized manner, and somehow that changes my whole vibe, right? I mean, it sounds maybe like unimportant, but you can see how one emotional trigger, as soon as you walk into a space, can send somebody into a tailspin that affects the people that are around them. So why not just say, I know this about myself, right? I have that self-awareness that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to buy that coat rack, even though I didn't really want to spend money on it. Or I'm going to, get that.
I like how you threw that in there. I didn't want to spend money on it, but you did it anyway.
Yeah.
One of the things that's so, one of the things that's interesting, and this is a communication strategy, this idea, like, if you don't know, you'll start to speculate. You will have in your head, you will start having a conversation about, this is why they did it. They'll say, it would start with, I wonder why they did it. This is why they did it. And depending on how long you do that, that can become fact. And that then becomes difficult for people to recover from. That's why I was, the more you practice, again, like, nobody's perfect, but the more you recognize, like, I'm speculating right now, like, I am creating my own answer for something that I don't know.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. So I call it like the stories that we tell ourselves. We have to be careful about the stories that we tell ourselves, and we have control over that too, right? And that's exactly what we were talking about earlier with when we know somebody, we think we know what the story is already. And so if we see ourselves starting to go down that path, stopping and saying like, well, instead of me writing this story for the person, why don't I get curious? And why don't I just ask the question? Like, let's have a conversation. And maybe even pointing out, your own bias and saying, hey, I saw this happen, and here's the story I told myself afterwards. Is that story accurate? Or, is it something completely different?
For sure. We talked about this, and then actually this is one of the other things that when we first met, because I was exploring this idea of breaking your personal algorithms, which is really what my part of my community is all about. And this idea of the information that you get, the information that you're kind of fed, where you're getting your information from, and it impacts how you think. And you mentioned, manipulating your news feed. And here's one of the things where I don't think people really understand how things like social media work. Like, we talk about algorithms and we talk about news feeds and stuff like that, but like I'll give you an example. I changed my picture on Facebook as a joke at the time where we were having tariff conversations with Canada, and Canada got mad at us. I changed my profile picture to a Canadian flag. Now, I don't mean that to be like I am USA all the way. Like, I don't mean that Michigan is a border state, but I'm just saying, like, I'm all the way. And it was just more like, here we go. I'm kind of glad that you guys said what you said. I didn't make a post. Like, I didn't post. I didn't say any words. I didn't say anything. My newsfeed changed on Facebook right away to nothing but Canada. Like, Canada this, why Canada's pissed at the US, Canadian blah blah blah. And it was just so fascinating. And so then I would change another picture, and it's like, now I'm getting bulletproof vests and survival gear and so we don't think about it. And the first time I realized this was when back in the day where I was trying to decide if I wanted to buy a Beachbody workout, right? It was like P90X, like old school, I'm like, I don't know if I need this or not. And I kept getting messages, like I would get an email and then it would show up in my news feed and then it would be on YouTube. I had no idea. And we can talk about this later, but for everyone that doesn't know, in these privacy settings that you click on, there's this thing about cross-platform advertising and communication. Even for a smart TV, if you go pay attention before you click on a free, here's all these free channels. LG, for example, says that you are saying that you talk to everybody in your household and they realize that they're going to have cross-platform advertising, and they're going to look at your data on your cell phone, laptops, whoever connects to this device. We don't, as a society, I don't think that we really understand that. So it can seem like the world is either completely in your favor or the world is falling apart, because that's how they make their money. They being, and I sound so conspiracy-like, but that's how social media works, right? I got to give you something. It's going to trigger you a little bit. I need you to click on it. Advertisers get something.
That's how, I want to say that's how influence works, right? It's that emotional appeal, and it drives somebody towards an action. And so just being aware of what triggers you. But here's something else that I wanted to say also is that it's not necessarily bad to be triggered. Somebody told me recently, and I just love this. It was like, I want somebody who's upset, because that means they care, right? And when somebody cares, they're willing to do something about it typically. And I absolutely agree with that. And I've been reminding myself of like, and actually that's why you and I ended up here, is because I saw your post about misinformation and it got me fired up, because I'm here right now trying to influence people behavior when it comes to how they consume their information, because it has such impact over them and the people around them, and ultimately our country and the world. I think it's so powerful. And so, being more cognizant of it, then we can do it with more intention.
Here's what I think, and this is me getting hypothetical. This is all opinion, America and globally, whoever's watching this. When I talk about the algorithms, and I'm going to tie that, remind me, I'm tying this back to what you said about being intentional about finding other information, like seeking out other information. But when we look at how social media is working, it really is designed. What will you click on? How much time will you spend on that page? Like
Mhm.
that's the algorithm. And it's also because of that, it's got baked in there triggers that make us angry or triggers that confirm our bias, right? I question at times from the algorithm's perspective, the influence is to click the button. Do you know what I mean? To click the button, to scroll, to spend time on it. That's what the algorithm is like. How likely are you to do this? This is what you're most likely to click on. That's different than, like, let's say from a health equity standpoint, I am trying to share with you information that you can do to protect yourself against the next COVID-19 or how to reduce your risk of cancer and things like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily using like that evil power for good, which it could be for. It's more of the action that's happening. And I question if that exacerbates the division. I had this theory that it's not really the politicians that are dividing us. It's actually the algorithms, which is how they're set up. That doesn't mean that it's not people not people leveraging how those algorithms work. I said I tie it back. I also try to be intentional. So I recently I tried to be intentional to seek out other points of view on LinkedIn. I pick LinkedIn because there's less trolls on LinkedIn. I mean, your real name is there typically, you know, that kind of stuff. So the conversations are kind of civil. And it's just interesting when I started doing that, how the world opened up. I found people with different opinions than mine. I also found people in different industries that we have similar problems, like, you know, education, environmental justice, and stuff like that. But my point is, like you had mentioned, change your news feed, adjust those settings. People don't pay attention to how that works. They get it on their phone. And actually, I'm making assumptions. I'm speculating like I know that to be truth. Um, but not that easy to find, even though it's not that hard to find. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's the first thing, like adjust your news feed. Maybe we should do something on that at some point. Do you know what I mean? Like you can do it, but you have to be intentional about it. Like, you have to say, I want to do this and this is why.
But like you said, some people don't even know that that's a possibility. They think that whatever is fed to them in their feed is what's actually, you know, the most important trending thing on the internet. Not realizing that, no, that was fed to you because you were a certain type of audience. What I like to think about is looking at different content. Like, what is my husband being served on the internet versus
Right.
what my son is being served on the internet versus what I'm being served. Or even with my students right now, like we're talking about all those things and getting their perspectives about the content that they're being fed, and through different platforms, right? Because that's how influence works. It starts with, who's my target demographic? What are their, you know, values and beliefs? And how do I relate to them so that they think that I am them? And then when, you know, they think that we are in this mutual connection, they're more willing to listen to me.
For sure. I'm bumming that we're out of time, and I'm also super bummed that I don't have your let's leave music. Maybe we could sing the Bronco fight song. I don't sing.
I was gonna
We could,
say, it's been a
do
minute
you,
since I
do
sang
you
that.
want to? Do you want to fight on? Fight on.
No, because I don't remember the
I'm, I'm
You
just
like it,
joking.
right on.
That's joking. Megan, here is Megan. I'm so glad you were here. This is fun. I absolutely want to do this again. All of you should follow Megan. Dan, or not Dan, Billy, thanks for your comments throughout. Whoever joins in on the replay, let us know that you watched it. Here's your QR code to Megan's LinkedIn. I'm not going to talk for you about whether or not you'll accept connections, but like, smash, subscribe the buttons, follow, all that good stuff. Please consider, I have a plethora of contacts following me, the organization Equity Communities of Practice, our community, YouTube, Facebook, all the things. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we will have another special episode with Maceo Owens, who is also known as the ERG Homegirl. She is also from Detroit. Whoop, whoop. I love it when I get that Michigan connection. If you were wondering where those lyrics came from in the very beginning, it's from a song called Propaganda by Dead Prez. It is a very interesting song. I will give folks a warning. I usually put hip hop songs on here. It's usually not safe for LinkedIn, meaning like don't have the speakers blasting at your workplace because there's probably 2 or 3 cuss words. Megan, you got any closing comments?
Hey, no, just glad to be here. Thanks for allowing me some time and space to try to influence some people about communicating more effectively.
Will you come back? I'm putting you on the spot. That's the former sales guy. Will you come back? Can we have more?
I was just reading how this is the right technique, a public commitment, forced to commit.
There you go. We old school, we call them tie down statements. So Megan, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody joining. Thanks for dropping by, and you all have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.